Oh, welcome back, guys. It is Wednesday morning, so if you're catching me live this morning and you're here, great. Let's grab some tea and maybe some water and have a chit chat about cholesterol. Before we get going for this morning's discussion, what I want to point out is the guides section in our group here. So just remember there's lots of lovely free resources. So up above in the group, there's our Penny and I, we have a banner, and then just below that banner it says guides. If you click on that guides section, you're gonna pull up a whole nice list of wonderful topics, and then underneath those topics there are all the resources and information. Like there's so many. We have programs and resources, we have testimonials, we have recipe collection. I think we have like over 70 recipes in there now. We have all the lives, so from Penny's mindset lives to my lifestyle and nutrition lives. So everything is so nicely filed in there that you can just go in, you can find the topic and then hit that topic and then see all the collection of things that we've created for you. All right, so we're gonna hop right on into it. Now, if you stay to the end, you're going to hear what the free giveaway is. So I will talk about that. So you want to stay all the way to the end. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit today about the three primary topics that I had listed in the description. We're not going outside of those topics because cholesterol is such it is a big topic. Now, you may not know that because you only ever hear, from your doctor, bad cholesterol, good cholesterol, the whole thing, right? But there is so much more to cholesterol than just that. So what we're going to focus on today is the three primary things. We're just going to look at what the good cholesterol classification is, what the bad cholesterol classification is, and then we're going to talk about the do's and don'ts in your nutrition. So we're focusing on looking at healthier choices to help support the cholesterol that your doctor has currently told you that that is high and you're trying to manage. Now, if you're listening, either you're on live or you're on the replay, just let me know below excuse me, in the comments. It's my morning clearing. Let me know in the comments below, has your doctor said to you that your bad cholesterol, which is your LDL, is high? So just let me know in the comments below. And if you've received any other types of information about your cholesterol, what is your LDL? What is your triglycerides? What is your overall ratios? What are they telling you in that blood work? And just as a quick sidebar, there are other types of blood markers to test to determine the inflammation factors in your body, to tell you, if you're a high risk for heart disease, stroke. Those particular ones that come up are the quite common ones. And it's not a standalone, it shouldn't be evaluated as a standalone blood test. What I mean by that is that we shouldn't just be evaluating, having a LDL, what our LDL, what our HDL is, what our triglycerides are, what our total ratios are between LDL and HDL in the blood work. We should be looking at other inflammation markers, but your general practitioner will not do that. So in that discussion, so that I'm clear, that discussion about what other blood work should be looked at is another discussion. So if that's something that interests you, just comment below, blood work so that I know that there's an interest in that topic, specifically markers for heart disease. Okay, so you probably know maybe at this point, what your LDL, what that means and what the HDL means, but commonly the LDL is called the bad cholesterol. And having a high LDL can lead to a buildup of cholesterol in your arteries. And then this can increase, heart disease and stroke and stuff like that. We're going to talk a little bit more about inflammation as we move through this discussion, because I feel like you guys need to really understand the differences in having high inflammation in the body and then what that does to the arteries. So high density lipoproteins, which is your HDL, which is commonly known as the good cholesterol. The HDL absorbs cholesterol in the blood and carries it back to the liver. Having a higher LDL lowers your risk of heart disease and stroke. So some of you may notice in your blood work that you have like a good average HDL, and then maybe your LDL is lower, or maybe your LDL is higher and your HDL is normal. It just really depends, who you are, what you're experiencing, what's happening. And then, of course, other ailments that you're dealing with, maybe like diabetes and things like that. Even menopause, post-menopause, the cholesterols they can be out of balance. Okay, so now that we understand a little bit of the differences between the two, we're gonna jump on into some particulars. So we're talking primarily today about what kinds of foods to implement into your nutrition and what kind of foods to stay away from. And this is where I'm going to talk a little bit more about inflammation in the body. Okay, so the big primary thing, and you probably hear this a lot, is to lower cholesterol. You want to limit your intake of things like saturated fat and trans fats. So when we talk about dietary choices today or nutritional choices, we'll talk about like what saturated fats look like, how they turn up, and then the trans fats and what they look like and how they turn up in, like in your dietary choices. Okay, so first, we're just going to tackle some quick cholesterol-friendly tips. So if, you're cooking in your kitchen and things, so, options to choose from, things to stay away from. So if you're into a lot of like frying foods, and then this will also like apply obviously when we talk a little bit more about frying foods, when you go out to eat as well, do you eat by fried foods? But I also want to get you guys to pay attention to some key things. So maybe to you, like when you go out for food and if fried foods isn't your thing, like like people normally think of that like deep fried stuff, definitely staying away from that, because that causes a lot of inflammation in the body. And then that becomes then the problem of high cholesterol, because you're damaging the arteries. Okay, so it's not necessarily the cholesterol that's the issue, it's the the foods that are causing the inflammation and the damage in the body that you're eating, and then the body's responding by laying down protection or repairing the arteries by pushing out cholesterol from the liver. Okay, so avoid frying in your kitchen, period. And then avoid frying when you're out getting food as well. So I also want you to pay attention to And this is a thing that a lot of people just don't really realize, is that, you know, restaurants will choose the most cheapest, crappiest oil they possibly can and cook their food in it. It doesn't matter if it's quote unquote deep frying. It could just be anything. So any way that they're cooking their food, you know, they're using crap oil, and the crap oil is inflammatory. So like I just mentioned, so if you really caught what I heard about the inflammation in the body, crappy oils, processed oils, which restaurants use, they don't use high quality oils, as you have that choice to do that when you cook at home. You can buy high quality oil, meaning like things like coconut oil or avocado oil, or using other like when you make if you make your dressings at home as well, using oils that are of better quality, maybe like an organic olive oil or some of the seed oils that are, you know, processed at high heats, you know, different things like that. You have that, you know, ability to of course, make those choices. Whereas in a restaurant, you know, they're going to use things like vegetable oil, quote unquote. They're going to use canola. They're going to use maybe cottonseed, like just or a mixture of those oils together, right? Okay, so if you're at home and you're cooking, you know, choose to bake your foods, broil, or steam instead. And then when you're out at a restaurant, choose to get something grilled as opposed to something that's been cooked in oils. Choosing leaner cuts of meat. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on in the conversation. But leaner cuts, you may know, like, you know, things like chicken breast or things like fish, things that don't necessarily have a lot of fat on them. I did a whole discussion around protein choices, like meat protein choices, back a couple of weeks ago. And I talked about the differences of, you know, picking good quality proteins that have been raised certain ways in comparison to like your typical standard commercial stuff. And that plays a big difference in also the toxic level of those meats. So if you're eating a lot of those commercial meats that have higher amounts of toxins in them, then that's going to cause inflammation in the body. That's going to cause damage to the arteries, and then that's going to raise the cholesterol. Choose lean cuts of meats and lean or extra lean ground beef. So again, too, like, I'm not coming here and saying that you need to cut out red meat. And we'll talk again a little bit about that in a moment, but the red meat you want to make better choices in. So if you missed that discussion, just type protein below and I will drop the link in the discussion for you so that you can pick up that that video, that live training. Remove things like skin from chicken or turkey before cooking it, so it's not, you know, cooking in a whole bunch of fats. That can make it a leaner option as well. Trim all visible fat off meat before cooking. I've always trained my clients to do this if, you know, they're choosing commercial meats. So the commercial meat, like I told you, is going to have a higher toxicity level in it based on how the animal was fed. So if, as an example, your animal was fed, you know, a grass-fed diet, things like that, then, you know, the toxicity level is going to be much different. But trimming all visible fats off meat before cooking is a good idea. And just that sidebar note about what I said about proteins. So remove the fat off the top of soups or stews after it's cooled down. Definitely a good idea because there's a lot of fats in soups as well too, which also then adds a lot of additional calories to your overall dietary intake. So you want to take that into consideration if you're trying to manage your weight or trying to lose weight as well. Okay, so lowering cholesterol and foods to avoid or limit. So we already talked a little bit about like how to look after things in your own kitchen. We're just going to break down a little bit more through our categories of types of foods to stay away from, and then I'll add my little optimal notes as we go along. So as I mentioned before, we were talking about red meat. So things like beef, lamb, pork are high in saturated fats. You don't necessarily have to cut those things out, like I was saying. It's just lowering the amount of them if you intake a lot, if you have a big dietary intake of them. But then also on that side note, I was talking about choosing how to choose better proteins, like how to choose better meats. Um, Based on how they're raised makes an impact, because you can have a better ratio of omega-3s for for good anti-inflammatory purposes. Now, if you were paying attention, I said earlier that a lot of these types of fats from animal meats and other types of foods, not just animal meats, will cause inflammation in the body. So they cause free radical damage to the arteries. Okay, so it's like taking little nips out of your artery walls, right? Causing damage, tears, and rips, whatever the case is. And then, that alerts the body that there's a problem happening, and then it's going to produce the cholesterol to send it out to repair the artery walls. Okay, so it's an inflammatory issue a lot of the time, not the cholesterol itself. We want to be cognizant of that, because it's what we're putting in our bodies that's causing that inflammation. Okay, so full fat dairy, in a big thing for Coach Penny and I when we teach our intuitive nutrition inside our coaching programs. One of the biggest things we talk about is inflammatory foods, teaching clients how to choose foods properly, how to reduce inflammation in their body. And one of the things that we talk about inside our coaching programs is dairy products. And so dairy products are not essentially great for you. They're not good. And if you're going to argue with me about it, go ahead, because I will stand my ground on it. I'm firm about it. And especially for those of you that have dairy intolerances, or who have not even identified that you have a dairy intolerance. So a lot of things like whole milk, butter, full fat yogurts, cream, cheese are also high in saturated fat. So again, we want to be careful about the amount of saturated fats we're taking in, because it is essentially the saturated, what's contained inside the saturated fat. So we want to be careful of that. Sorry, I have to plug my computer in. Just give me a moment. Okay, so we have to be careful of that. We want to stick to better options, of course, and I always tell our clients, to eliminate dairy. That's an optimal note, by the way, just letting you know that we do say that, and we give them better options to work with to help them not only lose the weight that they're trying to lose, but reduce the inflammation so that they're not having problems with other things down the road, like heart disease and stuff like that. Okay. Processed meats. So you guys probably already know this one. Processed meats is, obviously not a good choice. Things like cured sausages, bacon, hot dogs. Who even eats hot dogs these days? The things with all the fatty cut types, things that are high in sodium, that elevate blood pressure, things like that. Okay, so processed meats, fried foods, we talked a little bit about that, looking at when you're cooking your own things in your kitchen, but when you go out, we were talking about making better options, like getting a grilled piece of salmon or a grilled fish or grilled meat of some sort rather than getting a fried piece of meat or any type of fried food like French fries, onion rings, things like that, donuts, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so we want to stay away and avoid stuff like that as much as possible. Baked goods and sweets. So things like cookies, cakes, pastries are often made with a lot of like butter and shortening and stuff. Um, they're also high in sugar, which can increase your risk of heart disease, but also too, you can see a bit of a trend here with the different things that I'm talking about as far as staying away from certain foods that also have an effect on your blood sugars, creating diabetes, right? So as I mentioned before, if you have other underlying ailments in your current backpack, such as like diabetes, then you're gonna more than likely have cholesterol issues as well. So making these shifts just doesn't lower cholesterol, but overall helps a lot of the health concerns that are knocking on your door or have already invited themselves in. So taking really a good look at your overall intake of these foods and focusing on taking them out of the diet, and then we're going to talk about things to replace them with. Okay, so better choices in oils, of course. So you have to be careful with the types of oils that you're intaking. So just making sure that, even though coconut oil is a better oil, it's still high in saturated fats. So just making sure that when you're cooking with it, you're using, a minimal amount. Don't use a whole lot. And then, of course, I did talk about good oils and bad oils in the early part of the conversation. So really looking at shifting towards better choices of oils to use and cook with, just using them more on a minimal scale, and then moving far away from the oils that are highly processed. And I said things like, vegetable oil, cottonseed oil, rapeseed comes to mind. There's so many of them. So just be careful with that. Trans fats are also partially hydrogenated oils. So again, we really go back to the fried foods like processing and stuff like that, because trans fats show up a lot in that. And they're not good for cholesterol. But I mean, at the same time, I've explained that if it's high cholesterol that you're dealing with, and then you're having and eating these foods that I'm listing off, they're going to cause damage in the artery walls. So like I explained that a couple times before already. So go back and listen to what I said about it. And you may need to listen to the video a couple times, because you don't always catch everything that, that you hear and that you see and you read, and to go back and really understand that it's not sometimes just the cholesterol alone. Okay, processed foods. We've talked extensively about processed foods to this point. It has a category of its own, but everything from fried foods, processed meats, full fat or dairy products, baked goods and sweets, different various oils, trans fats. Well, then we have a whole category of processed foods, but really processed foods is such a broad, huge topic, or category, I should say. So anything from like packaged foods like crackers, cookies, frozen pizzas, are all voided of essential fibers, nutrients like vitamins and minerals, and often have trans fats, not so great oils, things like that lurking in their ingredients. And also too, the marketing and the food industry isn't always required to put certain labels or certain ingredients in their labels. So you have to be really careful of that as well. The standards aren't really up to standard, if you know what I mean. Okay, so we've listed off 8 of the don'ts. Now let's talk a little bit about the there's like a fly in here. I'm not having a good morning this morning. The computer's dying, and then I have a fly flying around my head. So lowering cholesterol and foods that you can enjoy and substitute in are fruits and vegetables, of course. And I hope, like, if you're sitting in our group and you're listening to this conversation, that you know by now fruits and vegetables are a huge thing and very, very important. They're loaded with things like vitamins and minerals. And of course, antioxidants. Now, let me just go back to talking about inflammation in the body. So a few minutes ago, I was talking about high inflammatory diet. So all the foods I just listed in my conversation are all pro-inflammatory. So if you want inflammation, keep eating those. But if you're trying to reduce inflammation and get that to a minimum, you want those types of things out of your diet and replacing them with a good whole diet. Okay, and then that contains things like antioxidants. So I was mentioning in the conversation about how when you eat the pro-inflammatory foods, they're going to cause nicks and bites and things out of your artery walls. They're going to cause cellular damage. Like, think about like throwing stones at a metal wall and seeing pits against the the metal wall. Visualizing that's what those types of foods do to your body inside. So antioxidants run around and like fix that all up, repairing all that damage. So fruits and vegetables contain antioxidants. So things like berries that are rich and loaded with antioxidants lower inflammation and can lower the quote-unquote bad cholesterol. So things like strawberries also contain soluble fiber. You'll see like pectins and things. If you've never heard that word before, it's just a type of fiber. And then this helps to ball up, things like excess cholesterol and toxins and stuff in your body, and then helps your liver to metabolize cholesterol better, and then it helps you poop it out of your body. Okay, we talked, when we were talking about proteins, we also talked about fish. So, and I mentioned that good sourced fish is high in omega-3s, which can protect the heart from clots, lower LDL cholesterol, but it's also an excellent swap out for some of the heavier type of, higher saturated meats, as an example. Okay, so beans and legumes, they would also give you a high fiber diet. And then again, too, like I was just mentioning about pectins in things like strawberries, they would help you pull out toxins and lower cholesterol. So, adding in additional fibers from natural resources. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll also give our clients fiber supplements, like in a powder form, and that can really help with supporting the liver, like I mentioned, pulling out those toxins, lowering the cholesterol. Okay, adding in healthy fats like unsaturated fats and omega-3 fatty acids. So they, again, like I was saying before, they help lower the inflammation, which also helps with the blood cholesterol levels. Fermented foods is really good as well. If you've never heard of fermented foods, you can look it up. Just Google it or Pinterest it. Fermented foods are really good. Things like making your own, what do you call it? I just lost the word. Oh my God, that's terrible. Fermented foods. Okay, so looking for things like tempeh, miso, there's all sorts of them. Just Google search it if you don't know what fermented foods are. Okay, green tea. Some research shows that drinking green tea can help lower your quote-unquote bad LDL cholesterol without impacting the good LDL. So we always say too, like really try to limit your caffeine intake. So maybe a caffeine-free option would be better. Herbs and spices such as ginger, garlic, turmeric are all shown to help lower cholesterol. So adding those herbs, to your homemade dressings, the different dishes that you're making at home. We have a ton of variety of recipes here in the group underneath the guide section. So there's lots of really great options for substituting out the bad foods for the good foods, and then utilizing some of these wonderful herbs into your diet. Okay, so that leads me back to, we've covered the do's and don'ts. So I've given you amazing options for things to stay away from, things to move more towards. We talked a little bit about the differences of LDL and HDL. Like I said, this is not a discussion going deeply into all the different things that come up around cholesterol. We're specifically talking about the nutritional components mainly. But if you have an interest in some things that I talked about today but didn't extend on, please do let me know, because those are always great for topics of trainings here in the group for you guys. Okay, so I said stay all the way to the end. Now, we've created a wonderful free PDF for you guys. It will contain some more of the information I talked about today. I touched on primary points. So it's a nice 4 or 5 page PDF file, and it has the do's and the don'ts. It gives you all the dietary options, things to stay away from, things to go for, breaks down what the LDLs are, what the HDLs are, breaks down what you can choose to do in the kitchen to help you support your your ailments, whatever you're working on. Okay, so if you want that PDF, down below in the comments, just say PDF, and then we'll get that PDF off to you. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the talk for today. And just remember, every Wednesday and Friday, Penny and I do our lives. You guys have been great. Every time we ask you, what you want to do when we send out the survey, you participate. So it helps us organize our month, and then we can bring you some really fantastic topics. Okay, guys, so we'll see you back here next week, and have a great day. Take care. Bye for now.